Did we ever establish who's doing the introduction on this one?
We never do.
Sit back, it's time to get groovy. Question, do you remember that movie?
Welcome back to Remember That Movie. I am the third Alejandro Rosa on IMDb.
I'm Steve Johnston, still not on IMDb.
Welcome back to our show. Welcome back to our podcast, videocast. For those of you on YouTube, is it a videocast if it's on YouTube?
I don't know.
I don't either. Let's start with a kind of new segment we're going to call the check-in. Cue sound effect. I wonder what it was. Okay, so we don't know. We'll put it in later. Okay, so this is just kind of a way to get us started. Instead of going to the main event, we just like to check in on each other to see what have we been watching or listening to or reading or whatnot. So, Steve, what's on your plate right now?
Not a whole heck of a lot. I suppose via osmosis? No, not osmosis. Via diffusion. Via second-hand viewing, I've been watching a stop-motion version of Wind in the Willows that was made in England back, I believe, in the 1980s. My daughter's currently well and truly engrossed in that, and I've kind of been, peeking my head around the corner and watching too. Apart from that, I have also been partaking in a little bit of YouTube. Some 5-minute histories on various warships from World War I, World War II, which has been interesting.
Well, I think I've actually seen that stop-motion Wind in the Willows.
Awesome.
When I was a kid, I watched it.
Okay, excellent.
Yeah, I think it was on HBO, right?
I think it might have been, yes.
Yeah, I think it aired on HBO originally, or maybe it aired somewhere else. I don't know.
It's a BBC production, so it might have been an HBO over stateside.
Right. Yeah.
That would make sense.
I love that.
Cool.
Let's see.
And you, sir, what have you been up to?
Lots of different things. Let's see. Recently watching some YouTube random channels that I just enjoy. Nothing coming to mind, of course, now that I have a camera staring at me.
Of course.
Tonight I'm hoping to see the finale of season 2 of The Bear, which is exceptional. Anybody who loves The Bear, please post a little bear emoji on the comments, because I love this show so much. Just started season 3 of The Witcher, which I really am enjoying, and still very upset about him leaving the show. By that I mean Henry Cavill. And listening to an audiobook about Robin Williams, which I'm almost done with. And my review would be beautiful and depressing. So there you go.
Yeah.
So, and that's a couple of things. Let's see. Oh, I just recently watched a random Keanu Reeves film called 47 Ronin, which
I had actually heard of.
That was a good film. I enjoyed it. It was kind of just interesting. It was like, why is Keanu here? It was like all these fantastic like Japanese actors and Keanu, who's just like, hi everybody. I like this movie, so I'm here.
Like the other.
Yes. So there you go. So that's what I've been up to.
Very good.
More things to watch for sure.
Yes.
And that leads us to tonight's or days or whenever you're listenings or watchings.
This episode's.
I'm stuck in a loop. Get me out of the loop.
Quick, just whack him on the side of the head. See if
step in. Step in.
So I know something that we both watched, and that was 1981's slapstick comedy, Caveman, starring Ringo Starr, Barbara Bach, Shelley Long, a very young Dennis Quaid, whom I had forgotten about completely, and then a couple other names of note, John Matuszak, who was an NFL player who then turned to acting a little bit. He played Tonda, the big, heavy bad guy of the film. And I'm willing to wager that you have actually seen him before. You just might not know it.
Yeah, I agree. I saw him and I thought, I've seen you play big, burly guys in other movies. I don't remember the name, I don't remember the movie, but I've definitely seen you before. His face was extremely familiar.
Yes, though oddly enough, the one that I think is most famous of his roles along the list that I recognized is one in which you don't really see much of his face. Do you remember Goonies?
Yeah.
Do you remember Sloth?
Of course.
That was him.
Okay, that I did not know. Wow, okay, fantastic.
And then I could not go through the cast list without mentioning the person who played the abominable snowman, Mr. Richard Mall, who you might remember better as Bull from Night Court.
Oh my God, that was Richard Mall under there?
Yes.
It's a big giant suit, guys, like with the claws.
You see his eyes, that's about
just eyes. Now that makes me want to go back and look closely to see if I can actually see his eyes. That's amazing.
I knew that going in. I looked for it. You really cannot tell that it is him at all.
It's a full body, costume. So, wow, that was fantastic.
Now, you mentioned that you had never seen this movie, never even heard of it until I mentioned.
Never heard of it and didn't know of its existence at all.
Right. Which I think that's the second time I've done that to you now. Both. I think it was Black Hole and now Caveman.
Yep. 2 for 2.
So I almost want to start with an apology to the audience, just because our previous couple episodes dealt with some heavier, darker material, and I decided to try and swing the pendulum over to the other side, be more lighthearted, a bit more silly. And I fear that I pushed it so hard that round about here the rope broke and the ball flew off the scale.
And based on how this movie would go, it would probably land in the groin of a dinosaur who would go, ooh, because that is the level of slapstick. And I think I'm just going to go ahead and jump in and say I was not braced for a slapstick comedy.
Okay.
I mean, I didn't know what I was braced for, but slapstick comedy was not what I thought you were going with. So, but anyway.
Now, in my defense, the last time I saw this film, and the only other time I'd seen this film, was in college. It was Saturday night, freshman year, and there was this cable show that showed bad movies at 1 o'clock in the morning, and this happened to be on. Now, I knew of Caveman's existence because my brother is a Beatles fan. The families are kind of Beatles fans, so we knew that, Ringo had been in this movie. I saw it in the listings, thought, gotta watch. And I remember laughing hysterically, though I think that might have been a product of it being 1 o'clock in the morning. But there were a couple of scenes that have burned themselves into my memory, and those were the scenes I was thinking of when I wrote this down on my list.
Yeah. And I think that happens to me too. You remember one or two things and forget the rest. But for some reason, those things get stuck in your mind, and that's why we bring those up, to this platform.
So to some degree, I was like you. I had forgotten just how slapsticky this movie was.
So much. And we'll get into it. We'll give some examples so that you know that we've done our research into this intellectual exercise. Do you want to try a 60-second recap? I bet you can do it in 10.
I can. It'll take a little longer than 10. But yes,
see.
We can give it a whirl.
All right.
Hold on. Let's see here.
Plot in 60 seconds.
Plot in 60 seconds. I've just got to remember names. That's the big thing.
Nice.
All right, here we go.
I don't know if they're that important, but go on.
It is the year ones. I can't even say it. I'm sorry.
Here, I'll lead you in. Ready? October 9th, 1 zillion BC.
A Took is a member of a tribe of cavemen. He is scrawny, he is not particularly great physically, and therefore he is the butt of everyone's jokes and gets pushed around by the other tribesmen, especially Tonda, the big burly leader of the tribe. A Took is in love with Lana. Unfortunately, Tonda is in love with Lana, and Lana is in love with Tonda. A Took's advances don't go unnoticed, and he is expelled from the tribe. He then sets off wandering through the wilderness, where he assembles a tribe of misfits, other cavemen that don't fit in really anywhere else. And together they make a bunch of important discoveries and advances. They learn to walk upright, they discover fire, and probably most importantly of all, they discover the poached egg. Armed with their new knowledge, Atuk leads an attack back on Tonda's tribe in an attempt to take over, and ultimately succeeds.
Fantastic. That's amazing. Well done. That's great. That's exactly right. Yeah, that's it. It is in a nutshell, folks. Before we go on, we have to point something out that I thought was really funny. It was one of the first things I wrote down about this film.
Okay.
And that is in reference to our last episode. Because we did Watership Down. And Caveman and Watership Down have something in common. And that is the use of language. In Watership Down, we had to try to learn an entire bunny language that we destroyed and decimated trying to pronounce. Because I watched the film one time and then I couldn't remember how to say any of those words.
Yep.
And in this film, language plays a big part again, but in a kind of different way. Because they don't talk in the way that we talk, right? It is very much the caveman kind of expressions. And there is a language there. You get to, the more you watch it, the more you pick up on certain words. They kind of teach you certain caveman words. And but yeah, another movie where language just goes for it, and we just have to ride along and try to figure it out.
That was another factor that made me pick this movie, is that it's in no known language. It's completely made up. There are, I think the vocabulary is about 30 words long, and at a couple of the premieres of the movie, audiences actually got a little card with the translation so that they knew what everyone was saying right off the bat.
I have to ask.
Yes.
What is going on with this movie? How did this movie even get made? And why is Ringo Starr in this movie? Let's just go ahead and let's just get to the middle of it, Stephen.
And given both time constraints and the fact that this was a relatively small production and not particularly well received at the time by critics, I couldn't find an awful lot going on. Now, I can tell you that a gentleman by the name of Carl Gottlieb both wrote and directed this movie. And Carl, you should check him out. He is an interesting little character. And I mean that in like kind of a, it's fascinating, interesting type of way. Yeah. He studied in college, studied dramatics in college, and then got a job writing for TV shows. He wrote for The Bob Newhart Show. He wrote for The Odd Couple. And probably most importantly for his career, wrote for the Smothers Brothers Variety Hour, for which he won an Emmy.
Wow.
During this time,
During
this time, he was... No, you're fine. During this time, he also acted in a bunch of minor roles, both in these TV shows and in a couple of motion pictures. And he was cast in a little Steven Spielberg flick about a shark as a minor character. Okay. Steven Spielberg and Carl were apparently friends, and so Spielberg asked him to do a little redraft on the script, because Peter Benchley had written an excellent drama, but there was no depth to the characters. There was no humor to the characters, and so Carl kind of came in and added that.
Punched it up, as they say.
Punched it up just a little bit, just made them a little more human so that it wasn't just a straight cut, dry drama thriller.
Are you ready for your random segue?
Yes.
Do you know? Let's see if you know a little trivia. Here you go. Random trivia.
Yep.
Do you know who was well known as a great punch-up writer? Who was in that wonderful trilogy that started in the late 70s and into the 80s, and still now past the trilogy and on?
Good punch-up writer.
Yeah.
I'm going to recognize the name as soon as you tell me.
Sure. Mm-hmm. Carrie Fisher.
No.
Mm-hmm. Carrie Fisher was often hired later in life. She was often hired to come in and punch up scripts and help them. She was really well respected in the Hollywood community for doing that. Yeah. When you needed your script getting bumped up, Carrie was funny and she knew how to write, and so they would bring her in. So anyway, back to you.
Carl Gottlieb worked on the script for Jaws. Jaws did very well, so Spielberg kind of brought him in again for Jaws 2, and Jaws 2 again did very well. He was a co-writer on the movie The Jerk, Steve Martin's film. And at some point in here, he also directed a short, live-action short, starring Steve Martin called The Absent-Minded Waiter, which got nominated for an Academy Award for Best Short in 1977. So, this is an incredibly talented guy.
Yeah.
And based on that, United Artists kind of tapped him and said, all right, you're going to work on Caveman for us. We know you can write because you've got, all these accolades behind you. So you know comedy. Yeah. And you've proven that you can direct because the one thing you've directed so far got nominated for an Academy Award.
That makes sense.
So, yeah.
Let's do it.
Now
wait, I know you may not know this or not, but did they offer him just go make us a movie? Or did they say, hey, we really want to do this movie about cavemen?
It's the second rather than the latter rather than the former. Based on what I could find, they had a caveman movie in mind and then tapped Carl to actually come in, do some writing on it, and direct it.
Now, was this Ringo Starr's first film?
Oh, heavens, no. No, this was like his, if you go with theatrical releases, it was about his 13th or something like that. Because you have the Beatles movies, Hard Day's Night and Help.
Okay.
Then you've got, little cameos in Yellow Submarine. And then he's got a good slew of other movies, most of which I'm not familiar with.
Okay.
The only one that I really recognized was a comedy from 1969 called The Magic Christian. And the only reason I know about that one is because it's Ringo Starr and Peter Sellers acting together.
Wow.
And that combo is kind of difficult to ignore.
I'm still going to say that if you had put that one on your list, I would have also said, I've never heard of that film, but it's fascinating that you know about a 1969 film with Ringo Starr and Peter Sellers.
Well, I know of it. I've never actually seen it. It was one that when I found out about it, my parents actually said, ooh, no, you're a little young for that one.
And then you really wanted to see it.
And then I really wanted to see it.
Wow, okay.
And then he has done a lot of documentary work.
Okay.
And a lot of TV work as well, especially in the United Kingdom. The one that pops immediately to mind is Thomas the Tank Engine, where he narrated the first couple seasons.
That's right.
Which are the best seasons, in my opinion.
Yes.
Because if it's not Ringo narrating, it's just not the same. No offense to George Carlin.
As usual, I like to bring my wife into this conversation because she tells me random things. And one of the things that she told me was, I didn't know Ringo did anything other than Thomas and the Tank Engine. And so it was his voice that she heard growing up. And then it was George Carlin.
Right.
Which her father, I think, said, was he doing community service or... Shout out to my father-in-law, who's also named Steve. Okay, so not his first film. And
not his
somehow,
first film.
But he was making movies. So, think about it. You get Ringo, so that's pretty big. You get Shelley Long, also big. I don't know the other actress who played Lana.
Barbara Bach?
I don't know Barbara Bach. I'm sure if it was 1981, I would know.
Probably. It would also help if you were Italian, just because she ended up doing a lot of Italian movies. The big role that she is known for outside of that is in James Bond, The Spy Who Loved Me from 1977. She was the lead Bond girl, Major Anya Amasova, if I'm recalling correctly.
Awesome.
And that's kind of her, I hate to say it, but if you go on Wikipedia, that's like, oh, she's known for this.
Yeah.
And a bunch of other stuff, but this is the one you remember.
This is the one. Okay. All right. Talking about the movie itself is hard to do because let me just say that when I first started watching the movie, I was like, I don't understand. What's happening in this movie? Everyone's just grunting at each other while they're trying to eat fruit off of trees. And I was like, okay, all right, let me just get... And the more I watched, the more slapstick it became. I was able to count not one, but two fart jokes. And not
only
one...
Two?
No, only two. I counted.
Okay.
And I also counted 2 poop jokes. Now, I say that... There's a lot more jokes. Those were just 2 that stood out to me. There is... It's the kind of film, I think, that when you just give in to it, then you find the humor in it, you know, and then you're like, okay, this is the ride I'm on. This is going to be really silly and just ridiculous. So let's just ride that. And once I did that, I think I started enjoying the film a little bit more once I knew that that was the channel I was on.
Mm-hmm.
I enjoyed it. I enjoyed parts of it. The thing that surprised me the most, we have dinosaurs in this film.
Yes.
And they are, I described it to my wife as stop motion Clash of the Titans-like animation.
Exactly. It's funny you should mention Clash of the Titans because Jim Danforth, who both designed the dinosaurs and directed the segments in which the actors and the dinosaurs interact, following his departure from this movie, which we can chat about if you'd like, because that's a little interesting tidbit. He went
now
from
you're just teasing us.
He went from this to work on Clash of the Titans.
No way.
Yep.
Oh my goodness.
He did, I believe, the Kraken sequence,
Ooh.
the Pegasus sequence, and there was one other that I don't remember now that I'm
amazing
trying to think about it.
That's so cool. Also, I'd like everyone to know, this is the second time I'm going to reference my wife, that I said to her, it's got this animation that's a stop motion, very much Clash of the Titans. And she said to me, what is Clash of the Titans? And I said, it is very difficult to talk to you sometimes. Anyway.
So, the dinosaur segments, I mentioned Jim Danforth.
Yeah.
Did the designing, did the directing, and contractually, he was supposed to get a co-director title on the film with Carl Gottlieb. The Directors Guild of America stepped in and said, absolutely not. You are not getting that you're not getting that credit on the movie. And so he left. The quote is, he left about 2/3 of the way through.
Okay.
And then the animation was picked up by other people.
Wow. Drama. Just to explain, like, Stephen lost the light.
I've just lost a light. So let me ask you, given that it is a lot of visual comedy, no English dialogue except for one scene where it's played for laughs, given the weird mashup between claymation dinosaurs and human actors, what did you think? Did this film work for you on any level whatsoever?
Okay. I think I can answer that. You know, we sometimes talk about the good, the bad, and the problematic.
Let's actually start then by, let me ask you, what was good? What worked for you?
Well, that's what I was going to answer. To answer your question,
I'll be quiet and you talk.
No, it's okay. No, very brief. What I would. Okay, he's choking because I said I would be brief. And
yes,
he thought
because
that was
I asked
so
you, what
funny.
did you like about the movie? Oh, this is going to be a short conversation.
Okay, here's the good. Slapstick comedy lovers who just love silly jokes and all they want to do is just laugh, they will love this film because that is absolutely what you get. In many ways, you could almost think of it like The Jerk, which is just one ridiculous thing after another, right? I'm not saying that there's no depth to The Jerk, but there's no depth to it's just funny. It's supposed to be funny, and it is funny, as opposed to like Planes, Trains, and Automobiles that has kind of a deeper levels to it, right? The Jerk doesn't have that. Now, granted, I haven't watched it in a long time, but I've watched it many times. But I mean, and I say that with this film, actually, if you take Steve Martin and you put him in this film, in the lead, totally works. Steve Martin, Martin Short. Oh my God, Willy Wonka. I'm blanking.
Gene Wilder.
Thank you, Gene Wilder. Gene Wilder was somebody else who I thought he could have been in this movie. Richard Pryor could have done this movie.
Yeah, oh yes, yeah.
Right? Like, these actors are great at this sort of thing. So it's that kind of movie. And there are movies like it, that were just goofy. So I think if you want that, this absolutely gives it to you. And so it's just one joke after another, whether, like I said, fart jokes, poop jokes. There's a giant insect that lands on Dennis Quaid's face. And his Atuk, our lead, Ringo, the way he solves it is how you solve any problem with a giant insect, right? You smash it. And he smashed it right into Dennis Quaid's face, except the insect was as big as my head. And so what happens with an insect, right? Everything just spews and it gets gross. But it covered Dennis Quaid's entire face. Disgusting. But funny. There's a scene. There's two scenes that come to mind when I think about this. Yes, like there's a random scene at the very beginning of the film where Atuk's character, Ringo, is sitting around and he's thinking about Lana, the girl he likes. And he's messing around with something that he's just kind of playing with. Did you notice that when he was messing with it? What he was messing with was a wheel. It was a wheel.
Oh, yes.
And it was half done.
Yeah.
And he's like carving it, and then he's like, and just throws it down. It's just a very small little sight gag. Later, when we meet all these other kind of band of cave people who get together, they have a scene where they're all talking, and they're all using different words. And at some point, one guy is saying English words. And at some point, they have an argument about the word friend, which I believe they call Bobo.
Bobo.
They say, Bobo. Bobo.
No,
and he goes, no,
it's friend.
It's friend. And everybody looks at him and glares. And he goes, Bobo? And he goes, yeah, Bobo. Yeah, I was laughing, right? I was laughing. And then they have a scene, which might honestly be one of the best scenes in the film. They've accidentally, come across fire, and they're all sitting around the campfire. And this felt very Blazing Saddles almost. They were sitting around the campfire. Somebody starts sort of tapping on something, which creates kind of the sound that's almost musical. And then it's kind of infectious. Everybody starts doing it until they're all having kind of a jam session and two people start dancing. And the funniest bit, which again, you have to watch the film in order for it to make any sense, is that one of the characters is an old blind man who is nothing but the butt of jokes. And at some point, he accidentally touches the fire and makes an
Oh, yes.
And it sounds good musically. So while they're doing that, this one person keeps grabbing his hand and occasionally putting it on the fire. So he goes, do, 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 and it makes total sense. And it is so dumb. But that's what this movie is. That's what this movie is. I mean, they discover fire by accident, armor by accident. They come across an ice age by accident.
That's it.
And I will say, like, there's all these. It's just full of sight gags. At some point, the main, what do you call it? The main cave group, or cave people group, is fishing. And how do they do that? The men hold the women by their legs, like if you were doing what do you call it? Like wheelbarrow style.
Wheelbarrow, yes.
But they're in the water. The women are in the water, and they're catching fish underwater and just lifting them up, and then they throw. And that's how they're fishing. This is how they fish. So it's just so ridiculous. I didn't hate it. I can't say that I loved it.
No, that is fair.
So, I mean, what about you? What was it like for you watching it again this time when it wasn't 1 in the morning, when you were actually taking notes like you were doing a paper for school?
I found myself thinking very similar thoughts to when I watched Watership Down, in that the first...
That's
let me explain. Let me explain.
Yep, slapstick movie and Watership Down, it's the same.
No, not necessarily in that, but in terms of the overall structure. You mentioned it yourself, that what we get is just a series of jokes, one right after the other. Okay. And I thought back to Watership Down. I'm still looking
for the Watership Down connection.
No, when I spoke about Watership Down, I mentioned that I did not care for the first 30 minutes of the movie because it was a series of vignettes that I could not string together.
Yes.
Caveman, for whatever reason, it struck me the same way. It's like, okay, we're just getting a little scene and it's funny, scene and it's funny, scene and it's funny. Once Ringo got kicked out and we actually started collecting the other tribe, and there was more of here is where the plot begins.
Yes.
That's when I started enjoying it a little bit more. I still liked the first part.
Yeah.
But the rest of it was far more fun. I had forgotten most of the jokes. The two that I absolutely loved, I still absolutely loved. First being the egg scene. Anything to do with that egg.
That was, it was, they stole an egg. It was a pterodactyl egg.
Pterodactyl
it's huge.
Egg. It's the size of an SUV.
It takes like 8 of them to carry it. So there's a lot of scenes of them trying to go up and down hills, and
they're carrying it along, and then they stop to rest, and they set it down, and then they start hearing muffled screams, and they realize that the guy who was under the egg, we just set it down on top of it.
So many sight jokes.
It's silly, but I laughed.
And then they dropped the egg.
Going back and forth on the hill when they couldn't quite get up the other side, and so they ran back down, and then and then eventually, us dropping it off the side of the cliff, it lands in a hot spring, and you have the invention of the poached or fried egg, whichever you prefer.
Yes, which then they take and rip in pieces and carry back to their people.
And then the second bit, and it's very brief. It's just the end of the abominable snowman scene, in which Ringo and his group flee, and the abominable snowman stops, looks left, looks right, shoulders slump, and he just kind of turns and starts plodding off to the side before the camera cuts away. I do not know why that tickled me so much, but I loved that.
You know, it was kind of like the fishing scene where I'm like, I don't know why this is funny, but this is funny to me, right? It just is. The guy speaking English, that made me laugh. There's a random moment at the beginning of the film, Dennis Quaid's character, Lar, he gets hurt. And for some reason, they just leave him, right?
Yep.
And so later, when a took is thrown out, he looks down and sees one footprint because Lar's leg is hurt. So he's just jumping on 1 foot. So he's only leaving one print. And then when they see each other and he calls out to him, they reunite, and for no reason that I could figure out, they do it in slow motion. So they're running towards each other, even though it's been like a day.
A day, it's like, in a romance movie where the two lovers are running towards each other in slow motion, except we've got Dennis Quaid and Ringo hopping on 1 foot toward each other because Ringo's decided to do it too for some reason.
It makes no sense. It makes no sense.
It's very absurd comedy, which
absurd.
If you're in the mood for it, is fantastic.
Absolutely, and I think that's the key. You have to be in the mood for this sort of thing. The other thing is, randomly, when there is something that I refer to as the water slide scene, because it looks like this is when Lana ends up going down the river or whatever, and then Lar accidentally goes down the river as well. But when you watch the film, if you watch the film, it sort of looks like they're on some kind of water slide that has the rock surface. And it just made me laugh because I'm like, that looks like a slide because it's only like this. It's very thin where they're sliding on. But it's up. So Lar ends up in the Ice Age for some reason in another part of their land, and they all go looking for him.
Ice Age.
Yes, nearby. And they all go looking for him. And when they go looking for him, they start playing the Lone Ranger theme song. Why? I have no idea. They just make these random choices.
The music, there were 3 pieces of music, 2 of which they got the rights for, obviously, and 1 that they didn't. There's the Lone Ranger theme, which you mentioned. Yes. There was, when they're carrying the egg, it's a piece of music from some military movie, and I cannot remember where it's from. Yeah. This one goes, do-do, do-do, do-do-do, do-do, 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 do-do. Oh, is that The Great Escape?
It might be.
Might be. Okay.
Hang on, ready? Let's find out. Text here. There you go.
So they obviously got the rights to use those 2 pieces of music. And
yeah,
then,
it was very clear.
For the fire scene,
yes,
they obviously did not get the rights to Also sprach Zarathustra, because you get sort of the generic version, the dollar store version of that tune. And
where do we know that tune from?
2001: Space Odyssey.
That's right. I watched that too, and I'm like, are they doing a 2001 joke? But yes. Then I was with you. I listened to the music, and I'm like, no, they're definitely doing a piece of music that is similar, but definitely not the piece of music. So yes, absolutely, right on. I noticed that as well. Wow. Wow. Okay.
All right. So
yes.
Now that we've kind of gone over the stuff that makes us happy about this film, the bad. What do you have in your bad column?
It's very easy, and I hate to repeat myself, but Hollywood, you do this to yourself. Hollywood, you do this to yourself. In this film, the bad for me is the role of women, because they are mostly, and when I say mostly, I say about 90% objectified sex symbols. That's it. There are only 2 women in focus in this film. There are other women in this film, but we don't care about them. So there's only 2 women in focus, which is the 2 movie stars. One is pretty much the wanted one, the one that took once, and then Shelley Long plays the one that he doesn't want, but who wants him. And that's it. Now, this does not take away from the fact that both of them actually did a great job. I thought it was funny. I thought some of the things that they did were really funny. Shelley Long is always funny. But come on. It was like, okay. And I mean, it wasn't. I mean, there's no way to put it. Like, they're pretty much just wearing fur bikinis the entire time. And that is the depth in which these characters go. The prickly for me, just to jump in.
Please do.
Everything having to do with Atuk and Lana. I mean,
yes.
At the beginning was very cringy, I have to say. There's a scene in which he drugs the big guy, but also drugs Lana, so they both pass
accidentally.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. And then he sort of tries to mount her while everyone is unconscious. Now, this does lead to a bit of physical comedy, which is very funny, but the act itself was horrible. I was like, and that was early in the film, and I was like, oh God, please don't tell me this film's gonna be like this. Like, I can't deal with this.
I had the same thoughts, like, oh no, is there more of this that I don't remember?
Exactly. And there was one more in particular for me, which is that Atuk and Lar at some point sneak into the cave and just try to kidnap Lana. Only because Atuk wants to be with her. And Lana doesn't. And she's made that abundantly clear. She wants to be with her big guy. But they decide that they're just going to go and kidnap her. And when she frees herself, she runs back to the person she wants to be with. And I was like, what the heck? Why is this in here? Like, if it was just I like her, she doesn't like me, you know? But it's like, I like her, so I'm just going to do stuff until I get her. Whether she likes it or not. And that was like, oh, this was unnecessary. And that did not age well.
No,
it wasn't that bit in particular. It was like, this isn't funny. This is just weird and unpleasant. So those were mine. That was it. What about you? Okay. What was bad, problematic, or prickly for you?
Looking at the problematic and the prickly, I agree with you 100%. That first scene, while there is a great bit of physical comedy that came out of it. The whole reason for getting into that physical comedy in the first place just made me uncomfortable. And again, the attempted kidnapping scene, really not a fan of that at all.
It wasn't funny.
It wasn't. I couldn't help but wonder, though, if this was not... and this is by no means trying to excuse the behavior.
Okay.
But is this, you think, sort of... Is this a product of its time? Because I remember movies that came out around this period, late 70s, early 80s, that kind of advertise themselves as, sex comedies, where this sort of behavior is kind of the key thing that is played up for laughs.
Yeah.
This day and age, no, it doesn't fly.
Right. I did think about that a little bit, but then at the same time, it was like, so much of the movie is not that, so it really wasn't the focus. So I don't know. And again, like that first scene, sure, I could give you that if that was the genre they were going for. Mm-hmm. But the kidnapping, that just doesn't make any sense. I mean, you can do the whole, they were just cavemen. They were just, I want it, I take it, you know. But it's still like, do you though? And I don't know if that's funny.
Not to do too big of a deep into Ringo's character.
Oh no, we're gonna do a whole doctoral thesis. Go on.
But no, there is a sort of an interesting
layers of a took.
Let us peel back a took layer. No. There's sort of an odd clash in his personality, because when his actions towards Lana being particularly vile by today's standards, versus just the level of compassion that he has for everyone else.
Yeah.
When Dennis Quaid gets injured in the very first monster attack, he tries to go back and help him along to have him rejoin the tribe, and then is told, no, he's injured, he's out of the tribe, that's it.
Yeah.
When he goes out and starts collecting his own tribe, so to speak, you have a very racially diverse group of cavemen that he puts together.
Yes.
Including a couple of gay cavemen. Don't know if you caught that.
Oh, very much. Mm-hmm.
So we've got like great examples on one side.
Yeah.
But the moment you say Lana, he's like, nope, back to the old caveman
ways. That whole
ways.
thing is just so inconsistent, right? And they don't do the sexualization stuff like with anyone else. Like they definitely don't do it with Shelley Long.
No.
No, she actually has like a personality and, whatever. And it's not about that at all. So it's, maybe that's just something that should have just been cut, right? Maybe it should have just been him longing for her, but I don't know. It didn't fit the character. They were trying to build a kind of sympathetic character who's just trying to do well and have his unrequited love. And I'm with you there until you try to sexually assault her or kidnap her, then I'm not with you anymore. Took. Not cool, man. Stop it. Wow. What a journey. There's a lot of stuff in between that we can't even remotely get into, like dinosaurs getting drugged,
Yes.
people falling into large amounts of poop, all kinds of things. So what do we think at the end of it all? What do we think of this film? I'm going to start with you. Since you saw this, you picked this. What do we think now, having looked back, having taken another ride on the caveman train?
So, has it aged well? Parts yes, parts no. We've talked about what we would definitely redo if we were remaking this today. But the overall level of physical comedy is fantastic. Again, you have to be in the mood for that sort of thing. If you're going into this expecting Shakespeare, you're going to be sorely disappointed.
Yes.
But I still enjoyed it, barring those two scenes.
Okay. I guess I'm trying to think.
Now, as someone who had not seen it before, what's your take?
I think I can appreciate the slapstick. As somebody who grew up watching a lot of movies with slapstick in it, definitely influenced me in my development. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I don't know if I'd feel... I don't think I'd be super comfortable recommending it, is what I would say. I'm like, I think it would have to have a lot of warnings to go with it.
Keep in mind, this is a movie from 1981.
Yeah, but other things came out during that time that had depth and, even comedies and, but yeah. So, I mean, I think that's, I don't know. I don't know. I don't think it holds up. I think it's it fits in that time period, but at the same time, it didn't even do well. So maybe it didn't even fit in that time period. Maybe it was an idea that did not go great.
It is funny that you mentioned how well it did.
Okay.
Because I said towards the beginning that the critics didn't like it.
Uh-huh.
Audiences had a slightly different take.
All right.
The movie was made for a budget of somewhere between 4 and 5 million. The exact number, for whatever reason, is lost to the annals of history.
Yeah.
And it grossed about 16.
That's not bad.
I'm not up on movie financing, but making back 3 times your budget sounds like pretty good performance to me.
Yeah.
The Siskel and Ebert didn't like it, but liked the dinosaur parts. They thought those were particularly well done. And the one quote that I absolutely loved was from Gary Arnold, writing in the Washington Post, who said, "Priceless it ain't, but if the kids are determined to enjoy it, the brain damage should be minimal."
You know what? That's funny. I think I told somebody, if I had been 12, I would have loved this movie. Mm-hmm. I would have not caught any of the problematic sexual stuff. It would have all been sight gags to me. So I think as a kid, I would have very much enjoyed it. And I would have laughed my pants off. Would I play it for my kids? No. No, I would not. Would my parents have let me watch it? Sure, because they just threw me the remote and went on and did their thing. Nothing against my parents. They're lovely people and they did a great job. But, at the time, it was like, yeah, watch whatever. It's fine. Which is, I guess, how I know what Clash of the Titans is. And my wife doesn't. She was reading books. Loser. Anyway, so yes, I think if teenagers, probably in the 1980s, probably had a great laugh. Younger than that as well. And I think probably it was, maybe it was the older folks who did not. Older as in older than teenagers who were like, okay. I mean, maybe people in their 20s were fine with it. I don't know. But yeah, okay. Huh. So Caveman.
Yes.
Caveman, if you want to watch, it's not available in most streaming services, but you can watch it on Tubi. Tubi. Not a sponsor. Tubi. Looking for those movies that you forgot you watched many years ago? Tubi. Apparently, this episode is not brought to you by General Electric, because Steven keeps losing his light.
So to end on a positive note.
Positive note. Yes, please.
So this was the movie where Ringo Starr met Barbara Bach.
Uh-huh.
And they fell in love.
Oh.
The movie was released on April 17th of 1981.
Okay.
Barbara and Ringo were married April 27th, 1981, just 10 days after the release.
10 days?
10 days. Now, remember, they met during filming, so they had
That's
a year.
Yeah.
Right. But they were married April 27th, 1981. They have been happily married ever since. So in the end, Atuk alunda Lana, and Lana alunda Atuk, for the right reasons this time.
We have to leave it there. Thank you all so much for listening to us talk about this bizarre film. If you're watching us on YouTube, feel free to subscribe if you want to watch more of us talking about random films that you may or may not have ever heard of. Any last words, Steven?
Nope.
We'll be back with another episode where we review something. And, Steven, are there any more of these on your list?
No, I want to promise our viewers/listeners, this is the only movie on my list that comes anywhere near this level of absurdity.
Yeah.
Everything else is a bit more classy.
We'll see,
I do
folks.
like good movies, I promise.
I mean, to be fair, the not good movies also make for great content. So
there's typically more to talk about there.
Very much, very much. All right, so we'll be back. We'll be back soon. In the meantime, take care, watch stuff, and hey, feel free to comment down below. Let us know if you've ever watched this film or any of the other stuff we talked about. Or if you just want to say something random, drop us a line. Stephen and I will do our best to reply. So thank you so much. See you next time.
Sit back, it's time to get groovy. Question, do you remember that movie?